Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Geelong Zone. Monday Funday or Tuesday, if you're living in the eastern states. Or we're here with Ethan, who is part of the Hoops crew. Unfortunately, Ethan was not available for the post-game live with the Hoops crew. He's in Australia, if anyone didn't know. Ethan, welcome to my show. First time on it. How's your trip been in Australia?
Been great. Going home tomorrow, thanks to the international dateline, going to literally be the longest day of my life. But everything's been great here. People have been wonderful. Compared to home, everything's cheap, which I know you guys complain about costs a lot, but it's all relative. Fun week of footy with some surprisingly close games.
Yeah, we'll get more into that. But we want to get your thoughts on the Geelong game. Obviously, what were your initial thoughts of that win? For me, the scoreline was a little bit flattering. I thought Essendon were a little bit more closer than what the scoreboard suggested. I thought they were fantastic in the third quarter. How did you see it personally?
Well, I think with a 5 day break and kind of the mental sort of approach of, you're expecting to roll these guys. You get the first three goals and it's looking like a training drill. I totally understand why there was a let off. Would it have been nice to pad percentage a little more, knowing what Adelaide ended up doing? Sure.
Yeah.
But I think as long as the team knows, like, all right, we've got to be better than that against Sydney. And I'm sure they do know that. Having Danger and Martin back will make a difference as well. And whether or not Jack Henry's available, at least we'll be able to go into a game knowing what to do with our defensive assignments, regardless of his status, because there was clearly some mismatches and some miscommunication after he went down. I think as long as they know that they'll have to be better against Sydney, I'm not concerned. And I'm glad you gave Essendon credit because this is the best they've played in a while. I know they were okay against the Swans. That was also just a super wet game. But like with all the injuries they've had, they got to come into this game with only one change and they looked more up for the challenge. And I mean, that third quarter, Merritt was really good. He broke O'Sheen's tag, which Butters couldn't even do.
Yeah.
Um, they got some decent stuff from Durham in that second half. He helped in driving play forward. And the youngster Jaden Nguyen got a lot of positive reviews. Now, Stengel could have easily had two early on him, but Nguyen did a good job.
No, Stengel, yeah, his form's been off the last couple of weeks, hasn't he? With his goal kicking, you can probably excuse from the boundary, even though he should get it because that's what he does best. But the one for me was when he was 20 meters out, and then he just sprayed it wide. That's a little bit more concerning for me.
I think that was one of I don't even know how many we've had this year, would be Brian assists that we've blown. Like, Brian probably could have two or three times the assists he does this year.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And you mentioned Merritt. We saw last week with Essendon, Brad Scott. No, he's moved magnets all year basically. He's tried everyone halfback. He's tried everyone forward. He moved McGrath last week against Sydney, which worked for that part, and he moved McGrath into the midfield again, albeit after the second half. And I thought they were fantastic, especially those midfield. Gresham had a very good game as well. But Merritt, McGrath, Gresham, they really did a lot of damage. And Ethan, the problem I have with that is we couldn't really stop them from getting clearances. They just sometimes walked out of the centre bounce, just walking it out, which was a little bit of concern for me.
Yeah, that's very fair because that third quarter was kind of just a big parade of them where early we had been getting them. So I think that is an appropriate area to have some concern in. But again, I think there's just that mental letdown that you can have after coming out, rolling a team early, thinking, "Oh, we'll beat them by 95 again," and then And there was definitely a moment where it was like, all right, let's snap out of this. Let's focus up and finish this game better. So I'm not as concerned about that. I think back to the Port game a week earlier where we were really good in clearances against a team that, like, yeah, they were missing Horn, Francis, and Bergman, but you're still dealing with Butters and Wines.
Yes.
And
No.
that
Yeah.
game, I point back to something we did where we adjusted after that first quarter because they were kind of putting some guys into like crisscrossing patterns to get loose. And the moment we caught on to that and didn't let them do that, we were fine. So yeah, I'm not overly concerned about that. But obviously,
You.
Sydney's got very good midfield and guys that can kind of combine the midfield and forward line. That's the scariest part of what they can do.
Yeah. We. Uh, mathematically, they can make finals. Mathematically, they have to. It's a 20-goal difference. They have to win by 80 points the last two games, and the 7 and 8 Hawthorn Bulldogs GWS, they got to lose by 80 in the last two games. Something ridiculous. But we saw Essendon. It looked like they conceded defeat. Essendon really good. Sydney were really poor in that game. This Brisbane game, this absolutely shocked me. I couldn't believe what I saw. As you mentioned, the midfield. Heaney was fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. Golden, ever since they've got Golden back, they've looked very good, Sydney. This 4 weeks ago, you probably think, well, Geelong, how much by? This is now a 50-50 game for me, Ethan. This is a very tough game because Sydney probably, like I said, mathematically it's ridiculous, but they're still in it. So they've still got something to play for. And I don't think they'll check out. I think they'll give 100% 4 quarters. And our record at the Sydney Cricket Ground, remember we went there last time, we got off the blocks early. We smashed them in the first quarter. And then after quarter time, they just completely rolled us. So this is a very dangerous game. This is probably a good test before finals, Ethan.
Yeah, I mean, I've known, like, I had been saying all year, hey, if these guys get healthy, they're dangerous. And you just really highlights Errol Golden's importance to everything they do. Like, as badly injured as Port is right now, that's kind of where the Swans were the first half of the season. So I'm not surprised. I'm surprised that they beat the Lions. I knew they could compete with them. Like, clearly, outside of the 9 teams that really have a shot at playing finals, they are by far the best of them. And I've said they could mess up someone's season, and we'll see how it turns out. They've clearly already done that to an extent. Like, I am relieved that they're pretty much out of it because, then they're more likely to, rest someone if they've just got like a bruised toenail or something. But they're gonna go after this. It's their final home game. They're gonna be up. And I think, again, we have the advantage of going in knowing, hey, this is by far our biggest challenge. And I would like to think that, like, at least 2 or 3 weeks out, the coaches have been locked in on this game.
What do we need to do to beat Sydney? What's the one thing you're looking for in order to beat the Swans at the SCG?
Well, just you talk about playing at the SCG, and obviously it's a totally different ground than what we play on usually. It's much, much more circular. So you could talk about wing play, but I think the biggest thing is just not let Heaney absolutely dominate because he's had some ridiculous games lately. It might also just be, I think the two guys you got to pay the most attention to are him and Golden. I think, like, as much as I like Chad Warner, you can survive a big game from him. Like, I would think O'Sheen and O'Connor, one of them goes to Errol Golden and the other goes to Isaac Heaney. Maybe if Golden's playing in the middle, Gryan will get some time on him. I mean, Gryan's been kind of our top pressure midfielder from a speed standpoint. Like, obviously, Atkins tackles everybody, but, he's not typically going to run down a guy in the open field. He's getting those tackles right off stoppages. I mean, we even put Gryan on Wines a couple weeks ago, and it worked.
Yeah. Well, it's only Monday. The teams are nowhere near ready yet, but we do know they're not playing Grundy. He's in concussion protocols, which is a huge loss for Sydney, and a
Massive.
massive game for us. Yeah, yeah.
Like I know we've talked on the with the hoops crew about how Reece Stanley tends to bring his best against the best, but still, you'd much rather deal with like Peter Laddams or whoever else they're going to throw in than Grundy with the run he's been on the last 2-3 months. I mean, this is up there with how he played the like pre-bye last season. He was on this kind of tear too, where he was one of their best ever game, and it's why they had such a great record. He was really the barometer for them in a lot of senses last year.
Is there a player for the Cats that you're looking, well, not looking, but kind of been disappointed in the last game against Essendon, or do you think all the team played well?
I know some people weren't happy with Sam DeConing. I actually thought he was all right. Um, I just thought most of our guys played around expectation. Like if there was no injury, I don't know who you would have, who you would have subbed out. It probably would have just been sub someone out to get them some rest, not sub someone out because they're underperforming.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, I can't really think of any like explicitly bad performance. I mean, I guess maybe we could probably get a little, there are some games where O'Connor can do more. There's definitely room for improvement from him. Um, I'd still love to see a way to work one of Buse or Kolajashny in, which, I'd rather that not be because of a Jack Henry injury, but curious which one of those gets in, depending on, and I think that kind of depends on matchups, because you know, you trust both with ball movement. I think you like Kolajashny more defending against smaller defenders. I mean, against smaller forwards. So you kind of have to look at, all right, who's got who, and then I think the question really becomes, do you have more of O'Sullivan defending one on one, which has had its ups and downs? He's still, I've said he gets another off season or two in the weight room, and he won't lose a one on one.
yeah.
But right now, he's still got room to improve there. So it's just that's really the question: is do you have Buse in with O'Sullivan defending more, or do you have Kolajashny in with O'Sullivan kind of roaming the wing more?
Yeah, with that Essendon game, I'll give credit here. We haven't mentioned him yet, but Liam McMahon, he did some damage. You know, 1-on-1 against DK, 1-on-1 against O'Sullivan. He was very good. He was against those defenders, Ethan.
He's good at ground level too. He handles that
Yeah,
very well for someone of his size, and until Merritt got going second half, he was easily the best for Essendon. I've talked about, we have an award, the polished turd, basically just the best player on the losing team each week. Like if you watched Carlton the other night, our old friend Francis Evans kicked 4, obvious winner.
no, well, that's exactly right. Good old Frank the Tank.
He
Um,
was great, like
now,
legitimately really good. It was fun.
Um, well, with Danger being rested, it was an opportunity for Nevitt to come in. That inside ball. How did you see his game? I thought he was average. Did a couple of
I
nice
thought he
things,
was
but he didn't
fine.
really stand out. Yeah,
I
yeah,
He took a
yeah,
couple of decent contested marks. He's a good big body. Just the thing is, I think we're in a position where our midfield has enough big bodies and we're looking for more speed. So that's where it becomes tough for him or George Stevens or Closey. I would think, you know, I think it was just an easy opportunity to get Jai Clark a game. That's one where, like, look, he's given it his all, but he's not up to that level. He's one that, I would much rather see Closey or Stevens get another crack.
yeah. I agree with you. I'd like to see Jordan Stevens in this team personally. No, he did. He was, as you mentioned, fine. He did fine, like Never did against the Bombers a couple of days ago. So I would like to see him get a couple of more goes. Maybe you'll see that. You probably won't see that this week. Probably Danger will come in for Nevitt straight away. Maybe the last game, maybe against Richmond. You might
I think
you might
I
see.
think
Yeah,
I think Pelosi still has as much as I like Stevens. I think Closey might have more use right now, just from a speed standpoint. Because Stevens, it's just we have other guys that can do the things he does. Like for example, if Tom Atkins had to miss a game, Stevens would be a very like for like replacement there. But again, I think, and especially against a pretty fast team like the Swans, I don't know if someone who profiles slower like him is really the guy for the job.
Well, it's gonna be a very tough game against the Swans. Probably 4 or 5 weeks ago we weren't going to say that, but as you've mentioned, when their players back, have been very very good. It's probably if let's be hypothetically here. If Sydney do win their last two games and don't make finals, there's going to be a conversation for wildcard round. Because they've I think if they do win, it'll be the last 6 out of the last 7 they've won. Um, they've been in terrific form. They had that horrible game against the Giants. But there's going to be a lot of talk with wildcard rounds. Same with the Bulldogs. Bulldogs, if they win their last two games, if they don't make finals, there's this talk of wildcard rounds going to come up every year. Are you a fan of it, or you don't like it? What?
No,
Because in American sports, Ethan, we see the NFL. We see it now with the NBA with the play-in. What's your take from American point of view on this?
well, first off, I was against baseball expanding. I was against the NFL expanding. Like the 7 seeds in the NFL have largely been terrible. There's been a
Mm,
couple exceptions. You had the Packers beat the Cowboys a couple years ago, but generally speaking, I've been against it. I've been really against it in college football, especially, but that's also because college football is a unique thing, I think, where you pretty much had to be perfect. You had to run the table instead of just be one of the best teams. You had to be just about untouchable. So it's a shame that that's gone by the wayside. Now, when the league expands to 19, if you wanted to do an 8 versus 9 game, okay, I could live with that. If the league gets to 20, and I love that there's talk now about that 20th team being Canberra, as cool as Darwin would
yeah,
be, like the support in Canberra is there. They come out
yeah.
every time the Giants are there. They do a terrific job. That would be such an easy solution. And
I yeah yeah go
and
on.
yeah, just can't have can't have more than half the league getting in. I think it needs to be less than half. So I would hope it doesn't come anytime soon. But yeah, once we get to 19, I could live with 8 versus 9, but other than that, I just don't think it's necessary. I think I'd much rather have a good team be on the wrong side of it than a crappy team getting
Mm.
in. Like even though like the cutoff this year, great that those ninth and 10th teams would be good, but there would be no race for it. Look at the gap between Sydney and everyone beneath them. There would be no theater in that at all.
For what it's worth, I completely agree with you. I don't see with Tasmania, not in yet with a 20th team coming, possibly Canberra, which I love that. Nothing against Darwin. I think we can play more games than Darwin, but I really do like Canberra. I don't see at this point until you bring in a 20th team. I don't see a point where you have a wild card round, basically for those reasons. Um, Now, let's say we've got St Kilda who's won their last 3. They've got a good draw. They could win their last 4 out of 5. I can't imagine if they played someone like Hawthorn in a wild card spot round, and becomes one of the worst games ever, and St Kilda get in. That would probably be a disaster. And then the next week they play finals and they get blown out.
Best case
So yeah,
scenario was probably the game they played each other a few weeks ago, which Hawthorn won by 20.
hmm.
So, like, as much as I think St. Kilda's a pain to play, and as much as I like the potential they have, that's not a finals worthy team. You know, they are
Absolutely
a good
not.
spoiler.
Yeah, yeah.
Not everyone remotely
Agree.
decent has to play into September.
No, I agree with that 100%. I don't really. want it to come in. Now we'll move away from Geelong for a little bit here. Other news: Melbourne. They've sadly moved on from their coach Simon Goodwin, sadly or non-sadly, however you see it. Chaplin is a caretaker manager, caretaker coach. Speaking of soccer here, with manager coach. So Buckley's on the list now. Ethan, I've got a question for you. What would you do if you're Buckley? Would you wait for Tasmania, or would you go with Melbourne?
I think I'd go with Melbourne. And if I was the D's, I would question if going for a coach who's been hired and been fired before is the right decision. I mean, I think I'd much rather see someone who's never been a head coach get a job. Like, I think I know Richmond's record isn't great, but like so far, Adam Uze, I really like what he's doing. I think he's got those guys up to compete just about every week.
Well, would you prefer someone like a Troy Chaplin, who's a caretaker coach, to coach him next year?
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of going external instead of just promoting from within. That just seems like reshuffling deck chairs. But at the same time, yeah, I do like the idea of it being just someone that hasn't been a head coach. Maybe, I would think, especially where Melbourne is, they do need a voice from outside the room. So maybe Buckley is able to come in with some experience and kind of do like an external audit and say, hey, this is where we need to fix things. I have the experience. I can tell you this, but I would still, while I do think an outside voice is good, I'd much rather see one that hasn't been a head coach. Although maybe with the age profile on their list, you can make a case for going with more experience because there is experience there, and there's also a young core that like has the potential to be really quality within a couple of years. Guys like Langford and Windsor, I think
Mm.
they could look back at this young wave as being the next big generation there.
Well, it's amazing when a new coach comes in how much the effort is into it. Oliver had a great game, one of his better games of the season. Max Gorn had a great game. Petrarca had a good game, kicked a goal. So it just shows you when a new coach comes in, these players, they want to show something. And Bulldogs, they got away with one there. Really got away with it. It felt weird, the Bulldogs playing at the MCG. It felt weird for me. They
It
don't
was
play
only
there
their
that often.
second game there all year. Like
Yeah.
North played there more, the Crows played there more.
It just feels weird that now, if they do get a home final, which is probably unlikely, it's not going to be at the Etihad. It's not going to be there. It's going to be at the MCG. So it's we've seen clubs that want to play at the MCG more often. I know Essendon were trying to get away from the Etihad. St Kilda want to play more games at MCG. Not that it's worked out to their advantage yet because they're rebuilding or they're not good enough. Maybe the Bulldogs, they do sell games on Marvel. They sell them to Mart Stadium in Ballarat. Maybe they can do that to the MCG. Maybe instead of saying, instead of going to Ballarat, maybe we'll just go to MCG. It would be a lot benefit for them because they're a team that are around about 7th to 9th every year. They do well. Wouldn't hurt them, Ethan.
I mean, it's like I like the relationship they have with Ballarat, and they've played pretty well there on most occasions. I know this year with the venue being only like half available, they pretty much had to make the adjustment there with that game against the Crows.
Well, yes. Well, they are redeveloping it. They're building more fixtures to it. So it just shows you they're not going to go anywhere anytime soon from Ballarat. Maybe in the future they want to play home games there, a bit like Geelong do. Just on that, Ethan. Now it looks like we might play Gold Coast um, in the first week. Where do you see it? Do we have it in Geelong or do we get used to the MCG?
Depends on, well, assume I think it would be at the MCG, considering that the only way I don't think it would be at the MCG would be if, it was the site for all four games, and considering that there'll almost certainly be one at the Adelaide Oval and possibly one at the Gabba, I think, no, it'll probably still be at the G, which I'd be okay with. I don't have that strong of an opinion about it. I would have kind of said, it'd be really funny to put it at Marvel with Hardwick's history there, but now they've actually won a few games there, so maybe that's done with. Seems like they finally figured out how to play there.
Just on that, the Gold Coast, they played Carlton on Saturday night. A little scare at the end where Carlton kicked 6 goals between late in the third quarter and in the last quarter. How did you see that game? How did you see that?
I was surprised that Jared Witts didn't get any love in the coaches' votes because I thought he kicked Tom DeConing's ass.
Yeah, there was a moment in that, I think it was the fourth quarter, where he just took it out the ruck and kicked the goal.
Yeah, and that wasn't one of the goal of the week nominees. I mean, ruck goals never seem to be there was one Briggs had earlier this year that didn't get enough love. There was one Rowan Marshall had that didn't get enough love either.
It's amazing because what ball movement can do. Because Mackay had a really good game, in my opinion. I thought he was really good. And Carlton, when they did improve their ball movement, as I said, they kicked 6 goals in a row. And Gold Coast were under a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure. Damien Hardwick had his hands in his head, thinking, "Oh God, not again." So there's hope for Carlton. There's hope for Carlton.
More than anything, the Suns, I don't think they really have that sense yet, and I've said this a bunch of times, of how to properly close a game out.
Yep. Killer instinct.
Because there is a time, obviously, to go into a shell and kind of park the bus, and I think they don't have a sense yet of when they need to park the bus and how to really execute it and kind of take the air out of the game and when to take those opportunities later in games. So they've clearly still got some things that they need to figure out. But also, when you get a game like that out of Matt Rowell, and you get both Ben King and Ben Long playing well, and you've got Sam Collins in this form, it matters a lot less. But I don't necessarily trust them in a close game against a good opponent. Clearly, this is not a bad team. Trust them much more at home, obviously. I like what they're building, but there are still some things that need to be smoothed out, I think, before they can truly be at the top. I don't think they're necessarily. I could see them winning a final or even two, but I also don't think necessarily that they're, what you would call a real contender to actually string together 3 finals wins, because there's just they don't quite have that experience and that refined nature yet.
On to Collingwood, who are really struggling. They are really, really struggling, especially with their defence. Darcy Moore has been horrible the last few weeks. Boss kicked 6 on him. Logan Morris got onto him. Cashier Deer kicked goals on him. Where do you see that? They've got a very tough game against the Crows. A very tough, where they could get blown out. They could lose by 67. It could get a lot worse. Even though LA weren't that impressive against.
Or they could just win by less than a goal, like they always seem to whenever they play against the Crows. That's one of those, they've had such a long run of dominance against them that I can't, until I see it, I'm not going to believe it. But they have problems right now, and I think they got exposed in this past game. Against Brisbane, like the Lions played really well. I think you saw a few problems. First off, nobody matched up with Jai Newcomb at clearances. Uh, Lloyd Meek had his way with Darcy Cameron. And for the second week in a row, they were bad in the forward half. Like indecisiveness when they had numbers going forward and could have played on, and then risky decisions to play on when they shouldn't. And then you added to that with just a bunch of like miscommunication on spoils in the defensive 50. And then really the thing that I thought stood out the most was anytime the ball went to ground, like that's where the lack of speed got exposed. This is a team that has to play a kick mark game because if you get the ball to ground level, you can outrun them because they're just most of them aren't that fast. And that's where Nick Watson, as much as I can't stand him, he killed them.
Yeah,
That's where they got killed altogether. And then you had obviously losing Jeremy Howe to concussion really hurt. And unfortunately, while I think he's a very underrated player, this was a pretty lousy game from Billy Frampton.
yeah. It's interesting because just 6 weeks ago there were three games clear, so it can go fast. It can go down fast real quick, Ethan. Really, really quick. In this sport. Moving on. Before we let you go, what do you want to see from the Cats against Sydney? What's the one thing that is a must for them to win this game?
I want to see another efficient game out of Bailey Smith. I want to see in a high pressure environment on the road. I just, his clearances, his kicks, I want to see some touch on them. I want to see him get credited with a few score launches because we know he can push play forward. But I would love to see him just hit a couple targets out of clearance instead of just kind of boot the ball ahead hoping someone's there. That's the biggest thing.
I completely agree. For me, this obsession with getting Cameron to 100, that's probably now over with. You can do it in the finals. Yeah, I think that's now gone for me. He's not going to kick 7 or 8 against Sydney. With all due respect to Rampy, who's a really good defender, all Australian defender. That's too tough. So in a way, I'm glad that's over with because there was a couple of moments in that first quarter, especially with Mena, who was 20 meters out, Ethan, and then decided to pass it to Cameron. I didn't like that. I thought that was just ridiculous. I want to get your opinion on that.
It was appropriate for the situation. Playing a game where you kind of look, it was like, all right, let's have some fun here. It was an acceptable time to give that a try. If you turn a game into a blowout, go right ahead and just boot everything for him. But I also think that some of the extra attention he got probably also helped Shannon Neal get loose. So I see positives on all fronts. Where like, even if he's not getting the ball, just having him in the opposition's head can lead to positives for some of the other targets. So I think we know when to turn it on and when to turn it off. I see no reason to think we can't. So I hope that we're able to switch that, and get into like serious mode versus let's just mess around mode.
Well, we got to turn it on for 4 quarters against this mob in Sydney. That's just an absolute given. Because if we don't, we could be in a little bit of trouble. But no, I agree. Neil was very good because of that reason. I thought Essendon were very good with Cameron, especially. We saw with Port Adelaide, he was getting cheap handballs. Port Adelaide were very loose. Essendon were very good at that. Stop Cameron from getting these little handballs. Yes. Essendon were well. Yeah. Here you go.
There was just more attention to detail there from Essendon that Port didn't have. Like where Cameron against Essendon, he wasn't kicking the toughest goals. It was just if you take your eye off him for even a moment, he's going to get it. And I think that, the Bombers, to their credit, just watched him much more closely, and I thought he would have had his way with some of those matchups. And they, even though it was a favorable matchup on paper, and he missed a couple he could have had later in the game, like they did all right on him.
It certainly did. Surprisingly, a lot of multis would have went down the drain, Ethan, because there's a lot of people that would have probably had a back on him, and they probably would have been disappointed. I think the sport bet companies made a lot of money that night. Now, I know Ben likes to say, "What's your 3-2-1?" I'm going to go a little bit different. What is your final thoughts for this week's game, or not even this week's game? Could it be for Essendon and Geelong? What are your final thoughts?
Mark Blitzovs didn't get enough love. I thought he was tremendous. A lot of games, it's one of those things that like you got to look closely at like which matchup he takes on, or kind of like, all right, who did he neutralize? Like I think back to the St. Kilda game where he pretty much took Cal Wilkie out of the equation and created a couple of goals off of that. I think Mark Blitzovs was very prominent and noticeable this past week, and when we get that form of him, it just shows what an irreplaceable, one of a kind, unique player he is, who constantly deserves more credit than he gets.
Absolutely, well said. So now you're going back home. Will you be available for post game live? Will you be watching the game, which is on a Sunday? I don't know why that game's on a Sunday.
Yep.
It is what it is. But so you'll be back home. You'll be watching, and you'll be good to go for post game live.
Yes, I will be watching with the much smaller Brian.
Yeah, I saw. If anyone hasn't noticed, go check out Ethan's page, American Watching Footy. I will put the his info in the link below. You got in the club rooms.
Yes,
that shocks me. How far you got it? How far you got in there? That must have been a hell of an experience. Just before we head off.
Unbelievable. Like just the accessibility, everyone being so friendly and welcoming. It's like, and I mean, I had a similarly great experience just meeting some of the GWS guys when they were just hanging out watching the VFL team the other day. But like, it was still like, these are guys that I'm watching on TV every week. And like, I'm just like meeting them and just chatting with them like it's nothing. Like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it is a surreal experience, especially when I go to Adelaide over to watch the Sheffield Shield. You see a lot of players who are playing for Australia in state teams, and it's a surreal experience getting their photos with. I mentioned to meet Manus Labuschagne, Usman Khawaja. Very surreal experience. What was your favourite ground, Ethan? Favourite ground to go to?
That's tough. Honestly, from just a pure sightline perspective, I love Geelong because with the narrow ground, it makes for a really good viewing angle, and I loved the like small lower level on the Reg Hickey stand. Visually, I love the Adelaide Oval. Adelaide Oval was something else. Between just the character of the different stands and the hill, it's just, I think, visually the most impressive stadium. And then I was just at Optus yesterday for what ended up being a much better game than expected. And just in terms of like sparkling, shiny, brand new, wow, that place is world class. And you could, copy and paste that stadium anywhere and just, switch the field size to meet whatever sport you're playing. And people will love it because that place, and just like everything surrounding it is, the train station, everything. It's all brand new. It's all sparkling. It's pretty ridiculous. But every stadium was cool for its own reason. But if I had to pick just one, I mean, probably the Adelaide Oval. But yeah, from like an actual facility standpoint, Optus was pretty magical too.
I would say I know their team has had a horrible year, but the atmosphere yesterday's game against the Crows, that would have been something else because it just
Yeah,
came through the TV.
Even though it was barely half full, I thought they would have gotten 40,000. It was a perfect day. They had a little under 33, which surprised me. especially considering, they were seeing off Sheed and McGovern. But, like, every time they controlled territory for a few minutes, after a stoppage, there was just a huge buzz from the crowd. Like, it was a really fun, energized, and intelligent football crowd. And they got, at the final siren, they gave the Eagles a well-deserved round of applause because, honestly, they played a really good game. Like, that was one of the best games Tim Kelly's played in years.
Yeah.
The youngster Shanahan is coming along. Campbell Chesser kicked a couple. Like, Jinby once again went out there and hung in there against Philthorpe. Like, they played their asses off, and they deservedly got a lot of credit. And
For
I
the
would just have
first
loved to see another 10 to 15,000 there to experience it because it was fun.
for the first time, you could see what West Coast, what their game plan is. They wanted to pressure Adelaide with tackling. We saw that with Hawthorn. Tackle, put high pressure on Adelaide, and Adelaide didn't really handle it that well. And West Coast, for 3 quarters, their pressure and their tackling was absolutely outstanding. Unfortunately, they couldn't do it for 4 quarters. Probably, Ethan, that's a blueprint on how to beat the Crows. Tackle, pressure for 4 quarters. If you can do that, you probably win. You probably beat the Crows.
Yeah, and, first off, there's no shame if you're one of the bottom, not just bottom like 3, but bottom 5 or 6, if you hang with the Crows for 3 quarters and then lose in the end because, all right, Jordan Dawson, Isaac Rankin, and Riley Philthorpe all stood up in the final quarter. Like, that's what the best players are supposed to do, and they did. But, yeah, I guess just that sort of pressure style. I thought at the start of the year you were just going to have to outscore the Crows. I didn't think their midfield would be this good, although Neil Bolin was quieted yesterday. Curtin was held in check. Peatling going down injured, I think, hurt a lot more than people realized because he's just been really important in, like, raising the floor of that midfield. But they did enough defensively. Keane was really sharp. Early on, I loved how Josh Worrell was playing. Like, they're missing another key cog in Michael Laney right now, but the plan to beat the Crows has clearly shifted from, just get to triple digits and hope that they don't kick like 20 goals, 5 behinds. They're a more complete team
No,
than they looked at the start of the year.
yeah, they're a lot better than when we played. We got them early. Remember they led by 30 points in that game, but we did get them early. They're a lot better team than what they were then. But Ethan, thank you for joining me. I really do
Thank you for
appreciate it. I'm
having
sorry
me.
you could. Absolutely. If you do miss post game live, I'm more than welcome to have you on because your opinions are very valid on the Hoops crew. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, and look forward to seeing more of your opinions in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who's helped make this trip such a huge success, whether or not I got to meet you in person, if you just pointed me to a good restaurant or bar. The whole experience has been phenomenal. And I'm not sure when the next trip will be, but this is certainly not the only one.
Well, that is very good to hear. Hopefully, when there is a trip, I can meet you personally. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to the Geelong meetup before the Port Adelaide game. I had other commitments at that time. So hopefully next time I can go to that and meet all you lovely people. But Ethan, we're going to head off. Thank you so much for joining. Make sure to add Ethan on Twitter at Americans Watching Football. I'll put the link in the description below. And Ethan, thank you so much for watching and being with us and with the Hoops crew. Your opinions are very valuable to us. It's good to know that we can have people on the other side of the world, that's doesn't know much about AFL, come in, give their expertise, and do it very well like yourself. So thank you so much, Ethan. And that will conclude our show, the Geelong Zone. Make sure to like and subscribe. Please also like the Hoops crew, like and subscribe them. Good bunch of guys. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon on the Geelong Zone and the Hoops crew. Goodbye for now.